Hey guys, welcome back to FNAF Book Time. Today we're going to be looking through Step Closer. We're almost caught up. We're almost to the latest book, Bunny Call. I was planning to be ready for it by now, but we have one more book to get through, and that is Step Closer, which is a bit of a mixed bag. It's got some good stories in it, and then it's got one that just... It's got one that's... It's Dance With Me. But regardless, I think it's a good book, and today we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about our theories about it. We're going to talk about what we think it means for the rest of the series. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. So, sit back, relax, maybe grab whatever it is you need. I don't care. And let's get started. So, story number 1 is obviously Step Closer. And in case you somehow haven't heard yet, it's about a boy named Pete and his brother Chuck. And they have kind of a rivalry going on, very similar, I might add, to what we see in FNAF 4, with obviously the bully and the bite victim. And so it's very similar to that. And Pete takes his brother to see Foxy, and it seems like he gets cursed. And I say that because from then on, he keeps having these freak accidents. He almost gets his hand cut off by a knife in a butcher shop. He almost gets a fishing line in his eye. All very, very unlikely things otherwise. And it's all because, and they find this out, Foxy says, you can be a pirate, but first you have to lose an eye and an arm. And so it seems like he curses Pete. And so, Pete has to kind of come to terms with this, and that takes up a good chunk of the story. And at the very end, he makes amends with his brother, and he's about to go and face Foxy, once and for all, when he's hit by a truck. It's great. It's a great story. He's hit by a truck, and it's very sad. It's a really sad story. And months later or weeks later, I believe, Chuck goes and he wants to face Foxy on his own, to kind of avenge Pete. And he goes to see Foxy in the back room, which weird detail. Somehow Foxy hasn't been fixed yet because he was there for maintenance. But he's still in the maintenance room weeks later, which is weird. But Chuck goes to apprehend him, to stop this curse, and Foxy isn't there, and the story ends. So a very simple story. Takes like 5 seconds to explain, or I guess 3 minutes exactly. Very simple story, and honestly, I don't have much to talk about for it. It's a really good story. It's very interesting, a very cool premise, but there's not much to talk about, beneath the surface. Not really many theories I can come up with. You guys might be different, but for me, I don't know. One thing that's really interesting is, since there's such a dynamic here between Foxy and Chuck, that's so similar. I know Pat talked about it in his theory, so I won't go into it too much, but how they're so similar to the bully and the bite victim in FNAF 4, I think there has to be a connection there. I don't know why. I'm not sure what it could reveal, really. It seems like there's meant to be something here, but it's not really something that we've found yet. Something important, but I can't place what it is, which, obviously isn't very helpful, but I don't know. I don't have any ideas. One interesting thing is, does this mean that curses are a thing in the FNAF universe? Because I don't think we've heard of anything similar to this before. This is like the first time we've heard of something like this. And yet, again, I think this is just a one-off story that's just kind of meant to be fun. And extremely sad, I don't think there's much to it. And, judging from how quickly we got through that story, this video is going to be much shorter than the past 3 in this series. By the way, link to that here somewhere, maybe, a link to that playlist with all the other videos in this series. But we might as well just move along to the second story, my least favorite in the entire series, Dance With Me. Dance With Me is very similar to 1:35 a.m. Right? So where in 1:35 a.m. you had a woman who was being basically haunted by this doll. Uh, in here, you have a young criminal named Casey, who was thrown out of her mother's house, um, and she steals from people and to make a living. And one day, when she's stealing from Circus Baby's Pizza World, uh, she gets these little cardboard glasses, which are supposed to make Ballora appear in front of you, like an illusion type of thing. Very sci-fi, especially for cardboard. But apparently, it's a thing that exists. And when she does that, she sees Ballora dancing in front of her, like across the street. Uh, so very creepy, very creepy. Except not really at all. Um, and so for some reason she just keeps putting on these glasses, and every time she does, Ballora is closer. And coincidentally, every time she does, she's also been stealing a lot of things. And eventually she realizes, oh, Ballora's getting closer because something bad must be about to happen. Never says what. Ballora never does anything remotely menacing. But I guess something bad, is probably going to happen maybe. And so she changes her ways. She becomes a good citizen, and nothing interesting ever happens. I mean, at the very end, let me find it. There's a part where Ballora is actually like starting to get remotely violent. It's just it's incredibly boring. And the interesting thing is, right, there's like one interesting thing about the story. Uh, the fact that Ballora shows up in cardboard glasses. Is it actually Ballora? Is it a hologram? What is it? Because the interesting thing is, when Casey's fellow robber friends put on the glasses, do they see Ballora? No, they don't. They see the glasses apparently make everything blue, which is very exciting as well. Just like everything in this story, and but yet on the side of the glasses apparently it says that it's going to make Ballora, dance in front of you. How exciting! And yet for them, it never happens. I don't know. Maybe that's because they're dudes. Maybe these glasses only work for women. I don't know. Either way, just incredibly boring and a complete waste of my time. Okay. I'm being a bit harsh. It's just I don't know. It's not very interesting. There's nothing to theorize about really, and the story itself isn't. It's just not interesting. At least the first story was interesting, even if there wasn't much to theorize about. But the second one, meh. The third story, however, is very, very, very interesting. I'm sure you've all heard of it. The interesting thing is MatPat hasn't done a theory about this yet. I believe Dawko's made a video about it, which, by the way, I'm not copying him. Just so we can, get the record straight. I'm not copying Dawko. But he did a video on this too. So this was probably a slightly less known one, even though it's by far the most interesting one in this story. And just like the first story, it's not scary. It's kind of sad, which is interesting. It's about a girl named Susy, and stop me if you've heard this one. A girl named Susy, who, she's living with her mom and her sister. It isn't explained what happened to the dad at first, and so I'll explain that later. But her mom and her sister, and Susy's acting a bit funny, or she thinks everyone else is acting funny. Her mom's depressed. Her sister is acting weird. Her sister is ignoring her. Nobody is responding to anything she says. And the way the story does this is really interesting because it doesn't tell you any of these things. It kind of lets you pick up on it as it goes on. When the story begins, as you're rereading the story, you realize everything immediately. You realize how many things you missed. But on your first read-through, you'll probably, unless again you have someone like me explaining this to you before you read it, you start to notice things in your second playthrough. For instance, Susy says that the world, it smells funny, which is a very weird thing to say, that the world smells funny, and it's not really explained what that means until the first night in this story. At night, Susy and her sister Samantha hear some thumping outside. and it's very weird because it's kind of a thump tap pattern. Thump tap thump tap, um, and Susy whispers to Samantha, you heard it too. Samantha doesn't reply as usual, and Susy goes outside. She goes to the door, and Chica is there. And this is the first time, well, I guess not. I guess, in the Twisted ones, we also saw the animatronics outside of the pizzeria for, like, a brief, like, the last 50 pages or so of that book. But in this one, so for some reason, Chica is outside of Freddy's, and it'll all make sense soon. And for some reason, Susy feels like she needs to go to Chica, which is, again, isn't explained ever. You kind of have to piece these things together for yourself. But Samantha shuts the door and says, "There's nothing out there. Go back to sleep," is what she says. And her mom, Susy and Samantha's mom, hears the same thing. She hears the thumping. She goes to check on Samantha's room. She sees Samantha's lying there. She does not see that Susy is there because Susy isn't there. She's at the door at this point. But as long as Samantha's there, she's happy. She thinks okay, she's safe. But for some reason, which I'll explain later, she doesn't care that Susy isn't in bed. And this is kind of where it's revealed. So Patricia goes over to Samantha, who's like, terrified, and she says, "I know you miss her. I miss her too." And this is kind of where, you start to realize, oh, she's dead. So yeah, Susy is dead, which doesn't make any sense, because obviously she's walking around, she's talking to people, but the thing is, the people aren't responding back. No one else notices she's there. The only one who notices that Susy is here is Samantha. And Samantha tries to ignore her because she knows that Susy is not alive. She doesn't know what's going on. She probably thinks that she's imagining it. But throughout the story, she tries to ignore her until closer to the end. And so the next day, Patricia, Susy's mom, is talking to her friend, and she's talking about, well, I'll read it to you. And so basically, Susy's mom and her friend just start talking about the missing children's incident and what happened. And at this point, it's basically, spelled out for us that Susy is dead, and that she is somehow, yet, still here with her family. And so clearly, something is up. And so what happens is, every night, Chica comes, and Susy will usually leave with her. Sometimes Samantha will close the door, and sometimes Susy will leave with her. It all depends on the night. And so, ever since the incident, Samantha has been going to a therapist to kind of get help. But the therapist can kind of tell that Samantha is holding something back, and so she asks her about it. And she mentions a doll named Gretchen. And Susy and Samantha are very different kids. Susy is a lot more creative. Samantha is a lot more, logical. And so they both wanted to do different things with Gretchen, the doll, and they didn't want to, share her. And so eventually Susy hid the doll. And so Susy, for some reason, wants Samantha to find this doll. She is trying to communicate with Samantha, but Samantha isn't listening to her. We know that Samantha can hear her because she reacts. She tries to ignore her, but she's not listening. And so what Susy tries to do is she gets some paper and some crayons, and she tries to draw out what she wants Samantha to do. She tries to draw out her thoughts for Samantha so that she'll listen. Because obviously you can ignore someone talking, but if you have a physical object where they're trying to tell you something, it's a bit harder to get rid of it. And so eventually, Samantha realizes Susy wants her to find Gretchen. She doesn't know why, she doesn't know what it's about, but she wants her to find Gretchen. And so she starts looking for Gretchen all around the house, and she doesn't find her. And when Susy was drawing, kind of what Samantha's supposed to do on these papers for Samantha to see, she shows that she only has a specific number of days to do so. Samantha has a limited amount of time to find Gretchen. We don't know what she needs Gretchen for. We don't know why there's a time limit yet. And so on the last night, when Chica comes, Samantha's looking for Gretchen, and Chica's trying to take Susy away. and Samantha is quickly trying to find Gretchen. Susy's running away. There's a great action scene. It's great. I did an audiobook on this story, on this entire book, and so if you want to actually hear me read the story, it's there. And so eventually, at the last second, Samantha finds Gretchen, and Susy takes it, and it looks like Chica's going to take Susy away again, and she does. You'd think something different would happen since Samantha found Gretchen, but nothing does. Chica takes away Susy just like she always did, but this time Susy is okay with going for whatever reason. But for some reason, almost immediately after, Susy comes back, and this part isn't explained, and I can't think of a reason why. Probably just for a good ending. So Susy leaves. Samantha's sad. She thinks she didn't get Gretchen in time, but then Susy comes back, and they have this really sweet moment where Samantha says she misses Susy, and then Susy does go, but Samantha says she kind of knows that she's going to a happier place. Now, what any of this means, I don't know. This is basically the ending of the story. But I think we can kind of piece together what it does mean. So, obviously, when Susy hid Gretchen, that had some sort of meaning here. What my thoughts are, the reason Chica comes to get Susy every night is that's when, from 12 to 6 a.m., I think it says that specifically at midnight is when Chica comes. That's when Susy goes to possess Chica. Every night. And there's a specific number of nights she has where she does this until something happens where she can no longer really be rescued from that. I'm guessing that the last day is the what's it called? The happiest day minigame from FNAF 3 where they're all set free. And that's the last day. And because Chica found the doll, because Samantha found the doll, then Susy can be set free. The problem with that is, it doesn't make much sense. Do the other children also have an item that they're attached to, and it has to be found before they can actually be set free? Or is it just Susy? We don't know. And the other thing is, the Happiest Day minigame, I don't think takes place... it's mentioned that the story takes place 1 year after the missing children's incident, and I'm pretty sure Happiest Day takes place long after that. We don't know. But by the time you get to the end of the story, mostly everything is explained. The ending does seem a bit rushed, but it seems like mostly everything kind of fits together in the end, and we kind of know, what's going on here. Overall, if I had to take a guess, I'd say this story kind of gives us some insight into what happens during the day when the animatronics aren't possessed and aren't allowed to roam free. It seems like they might go back to their homes, where they have to try and be set free. I'm not sure. But that seems like that's kind of what the authors are trying to say here. Okay, let's talk about the Stitch Wraith here. The last thing here. The Stitch Wraith story here is pretty simple. Jake, who I'm sure you've heard about by now, is a kid who wakes up, realizes he's in the Stitch Wraith. He doesn't know that it's called that. That's just kind of what the locals call it, but we'll call it that. He realizes he's inside this metal thing, and there's a kid named Andrew with him. And so these two kids, we're meeting them for the first time, but not the last time, obviously. And Jake, he's a very sweet kid. Andrew, on the other hand, is very grumpy. And so they're trying to make sense of where they are and what's going on, and so are we. And so Jake asks, how did you get here? And after a little while of Andrew being very very rough, he says that he was very angry. He says that he wanted to get back at someone who hurt him. He thinks he attached himself to him. He got into his soul, made sure he couldn't move on when he should have died, and he wanted him to suffer, no matter how much they tried to save him. Now, I'm going to talk about this more next time, when we talk about Bunny Call, because Bunny Call sheds a ton of light on this, but I do want to mention all this. Andrew says that he remembers they tried to kill him. Who's they? We don't know yet, but he remembers they tried to kill him, but he wasn't going to let him go until he was ready. He knows he was in him when we got to this big place with lots of cool stuff. Again, with Bunny Call, we know what that is, and I'll get to that next time. All I can remember after that is wanting to be everywhere. I can remember being all over the place in all kinds of things. and I remember this animatronic dog, Fetch. He broke down in a thunderstorm. I don't know why he only mentions Fetch. Maybe it's because Fetch is in the Stitch Wraith now, and so he remembers it more. We don't know that yet, but I'm sure we're going to get answers soon. And then, okay, and they're in a truck. They realize that they're in a truck, and a man comes to unload them from the truck until they kill him. They zap him somehow. They reach out and they zap him. Don't know how that happens, but apparently it does. And so they realize that neither of them did it, and so they think that there might be another person in here with them, and that they should collect all the stuff that Andrew infected with his anger so they can figure all his stuff out. And that's kind of where the teaser ends. It's very, very confusing, but also very, very interesting. When we first got this book, we had no idea what he was talking about because Andrew was being so vague about where he came from, how he got here. But in the next book, I'm going to talk about a bit more about what this all means. So, stay tuned for that. It's coming soon. In the meantime, thank you guys for watching. This has been a lot shorter of one because I didn't have nearly as much to talk about, but it was fun. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bunny Call. If you're new here, at this point, you might as well subscribe. Bye.